Hello, welcome to everyone, and thank you very much for all of you for being with us this morning. I am Françoise Claire, I'm head of classical music for the Centre National de la Musique, and I'm delighted to welcome such a wonderful panel of guests this morning to talk about what we call short circuits. The discussion is going to be around the sustainability of the music world today in the context of this global pandemic, but also what it is going to leave us and how an opera or a classical music organization can today consider an international tour and being responsible and eco-responsible. So for leading this discussion, as usual, we have our friend and loyal moderator, Eric Lanoote, and Eric is going to talk with this wonderful panel of guests again. So thank you very much to all and have a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Françoise. So I'm very happy to welcome on board in this digital online seminar very special guests from whole Europe, managers of the highest level on institution, companies, as well as consultants. Let me start maybe with the ladies. So warm welcome to Aline Sam-Giao, who is CEO of Auditorium-Orchestre National de Lyon in France. Good morning, Aline.
Hello.
And we have also on board Valentina Bressan. Valentina has been a long time technical director at Palais Garnier at National Opera in Paris and is in the last months been chargé de mission consultant for Alexandre Neff and Martin Ashdari at National Opera in Paris for sustainability and environmental issues. Also, welcome to you, Valentina.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Likewise, we have on board Sophie Lanoote. You may know Sophie in diverse qualities. She has been an artist manager. She has also managed symphonic orchestras on the continent, and she's now also a consultant. And she wrote with Nathalie Moine a white paper where we marked one called Le spectacle et le vivant. She will translate it for us. We are very proud and happy having her now on board. Good morning in Paris, Sophie.
Thank you, Eric.
Let's go to the guys. So we have, let's start maybe, although we stay on the continent, let's start with two Swiss guests, maybe with Michel Haefliger. I don't need to present Michel Haefliger to our audience. He's the intendant of the Lucerne Festival. Warm welcome, Michel. We're very, very glad and honored having you. Close to Lucerne, in the canton of Zurich, Michel Herz. Michel, a lot of our listeners and viewers do know also Michel, or at least his artists. He's the founder, now you artists, he's the founder of a leading artist agency, touring agency, with diverse ramifications throughout the continent, based in Zurich. And just for the French viewers at Centre National de la Musique, he is also touring some of the leading French ensembles, and this for years. Also, warm welcome. We know how tense is your time schedule, dear Michel. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. Just one correction. I'm not the founder. I'm just managing director.
Oh, just managing director.
So
you will tell us a bit more. My mistake.
We are doing fine, but it's complicated.
Yeah, so we learn about that. And let's cross the channel and we stay in Europe, not maybe not particularly institutionally, but at least geographically. And we go to the Barbican Center. We have the honor today having the head of music of Barbican Center. We'll be very jealous for this for all our colleagues I know on the continent. Hugh Humphreys is there with us. It's early morning in London. Also a warm welcome to you, Hugh. You are on mute.
Thank you, Eric, and still very much in Europe spiritually.
That's good. That's good, geographically and spiritually. So it won't be a surprise for our viewers, the ones who are following us, hundreds and thousands. Thank you so much for faithfulness. I always start with personal biographies and asking our guests to present themselves and on, I mean, of course, in strong connection and with the issue. Issue is a very French word or question. It's called circuit court. With that, we mean capacity of a local distribution. Of course, we are in a very global industry. Each of you has been sourcing, marketing, presenting artists from the whole world. And it has been such a revolution in the last 2 years now, having to think a little bit more locally. So my very first question to each of you is, what has this issue been for you personally and professionally, a strategic one in those last months, maybe earlier on? And then we come later on in another question raised on what you're doing for your institution for this. But let's start very on a personal point of view. If you allow me, we keep the same circuit. So we start in Lyon, close to the Swiss border, with Aline.
Thank you, Eric. Just before coming to the very topic of today, which is short and local, I want just a few words on sustainability in general, because on this subject, which is much wider than the topic we have today to deal with, I have always, as a professional ethic, considered sustainability in terms of well-being, for example, of the people working in an organization and how to keep them motivated and inside the organization and wanted to go forward. But apart from that, this subject is was not really familiar with me a few years ago. It's not very politically correct today to say it, but well, I was not completely feeling concerned about this subject. And I had a first eraseness about this subject when a group of workers at Auditorium came to me in 2018, saying that they wanted to work on the subject of green sustainability altogether. And so I said, okay, let's start a group. And it was the green team that was born. And a year after that, in 2019, we had quite a long tour in China, a 3-week tour in China. And it was in June 2019. And when we came back, musicians came to me and they had calculated actually the carbon footprint of the tour themselves, saying, so now what do we do with that? And it was like a fight in the orchestra committee, because some of the musicians were looking at them in anger, saying, look, this is our job. What are you going to do? I completely don't even want to talk about this subject. So that was the second. And I started really to think about it and realized that we could not stay without doing anything. And I would say that the last alert that I had was during the lockdown. After the lockdown, the first one, the strong March, April 2021, it was impossible for me to imagine planning tours immediately in the way we used to do it before, contacting a tour organizer, then planning 3 weeks in the schedule, and then just choosing a soloist and a program, and okay, and that's it. It was very important for me to think about the solidarity that that had raised in the sector during this time, and the way we could have partnerships. So that is the state of my reflection, and I will come later to what we've done, of course.
Beautiful. Thank you for this very thoughtful and sensitive approach. Yeah, we come to all these 3 layers or steps of awareness later on, but they're already very substantial. We go a little bit northern to Paris, where resides Valentina. So Valentina, you are not only a technical director, you are also a scenographer, you are also a stage director. So you have been working in different institutions in Europe. And then you came to Palais Garnier, which is one of the hottest places of traditional industry-like relationships with trade unions, industry-like relationships with the audience, was probably in some way conservative for the best, maybe also sometimes for the worst. And you came to a very personal awareness. You told me as we were preparing this show on sustainability and environmental questions. When did it come to your mind? And why did you accept this terrible mission of having and bearing the responsibility on these subjects at the Opéra National?
So thank you, Rick. As you say, just to have a general explication about my my career, I start work. I work during 25 years in the opera, in the technical department, as you say, and I've been also a scenographer and custom designer, and I mostly work with for my creation for opera which had less money than the big houses. So I've been used to reuse existing set and to create. So the process of creation is quite different when you have less possibilities with money. So this is a different exercise. When I've been a technical director, especially when I've been in Corrigé d'Orange, which is a festival outside, I was very desperate about the amount of waste of the set. And I was convinced that we had to reduce the amount of waste. And I've been visiting a fabric of treatment of waste, and I've been really shocked about it. I was really convinced we had to stop using plastic. But when I see the amount, the huge mountain of waste, I understand that we had absolutely to change the scale and to become much more efficient. So I felt it necessary to understand the reason why we produce as much as waste. So this was the first point of my personal reflection. I joined the Paris Opera in 2018 in Bastille as deputy technical director. And in 2019, I joined Garnier, but it was a very difficult moment because we go through a very long period of strike. And then we pass through the pandemic period. So I've never seen a production I work over until the end. I never work until the end on a production. So it was a very frustrating situation. And when I arrived at the Paris Opera, people was asking for action in sustainability, but there was really no one which was in charge of that. The opera started to reduce the amount of energies, but it was not enough. We had a lot of waste, and people was very discouraged. It was very hard for them. So I started to take this subject and work on, and as long the time I introduce the sustainability into my work, and more or less 1 year ago, the direction asked me to realize a general roadmap for sustainability, and then I realized how huge is it, and I really changed my point of view about the action the opera has to do in sustainability.
Great. So you will tell, thanks so much. You will tell us later on about this huge challenge it must be, and we go in detail. Thanks so much. As I was reading, I read it twice and a third time for preparing this meeting, the white paper. I encourage everyone to read by Sophie and Natalie. Valentina, you are quoted something like 17 times in this paper, which is a kind of philosophical essay, which goes very, very straightforward from Valentina Bressan up to Elinor Ostrom, and through the whole cultural rights and democracy, cultural democracy issues, and articulating social with environmental, political, economical issues. So once it is said, I knew Sophie not so much as an environmental geek or militant, as we say in French, but much more as someone who was trying to tour her artists, and with great success and talent, all over the world. Maybe by train, but at least touring them. So Sophie, when did you start feeling, okay, you have also been, I mentioned it, orchestra manager, Magasin in Normandy. When did you start to have that consciousness that it cannot go on as it went? I know it came much before COVID. Tell us this, please.
Yes, I do confess. I used to be an agent, an artist manager, but this is no longer the case. And well, you are asking me on the genesis of my engagement, Eric. It is not very original, but I must say the lockdown has been pretty instructive from this point of view, because I had, well, it was quite an intimate issue. I felt like I had to do something, but this was very personal, you know, my private life, etc. But then with the lockdown and the pandemic, etc., it came out that I had to kind of align my personal views and my professional views, and I had to do something to articulate the kind of action and influence that we can have individually and collectively. And well, I wanted to articulate also my environmental and my social concerns for the way we are dealing with our professional career and management styles. And yes, I wanted to deliver a kind of reflection on to focus on the care for colleagues, teams, of course, the living nature, what we usually call nature, but also the cultural rights that are emerging in the thinking of our professional field. And well, I wanted to deal with this kind of a threatening emergency, threatening life emergency. And it comes out that my new purpose would be to be a consultant to help managers, general managers, and also teams, and artists, technicians, administrative teams, to deal with corporate social responsibility, with conducting, managing change. I wanted to take my part, to be part of this really necessary transformation of our sector, cultural sector. And the cultural sector has to do something for it, because otherwise I'm pretty convinced that well, we cannot, there cannot be any exception. The cultural sector has to do something for the great transition that has to happen in the coming years. And actually right now, it is the biggest issue. I remember we have spoken of this in Sciences Po, where I'm a teacher, with Valentina, whose testimony was really accurate and actually moving, because she said this is the biggest issue we have to deal with, not in the coming years, but right now. So this is part of my personal and professional engagement as well.
Right. Thank you. Very moving. Thanks. So we cross the Léman Lake and go to Lucerne. Michel, you know better than anyone probably on this planet how this classical music business is structured. It has this pyramidal structure which allows it to be so efficient, and even in the most challenging environments, we survived 2 world wars greatly, I would say. We globalized before pop music, before any kind of cultural practice, practically. We have a thriving public sector on the continent, in France, on the continent, in France, in Germany, in the UK, but also in Northern America, and now in Southeast Asia. And the Lucerne Festival is one of these, I can say, top 3, top 5, maybe top 1 institutions where everyone is looking at, together with Salzburg, Bayreuth, etc. I don't need to name it. That means what you are deciding, you and your team and your board, is practically giving, we say in France, the et, le la, to the rest of the industry. So on a personal basis, you're living in a context ecosystem where ecology, Umweltbewusstsein, for a long time is a very moving sociological force for 30 years, probably 50 years even. So how did you live it? How has COVID practically changed or not your mindset? How as a human being and a manager, these issues do resonate for you?
Well, that was a long introduction. Many thanks, Eric, and also for the very flattering words, which, you know, we don't really think about those aspects so much. We try to do best what we do every day. And what I can see is in terms of the work of my team, the number of meetings on the subject of sustainability have tripled, quadrupled in only the past month. Why? Because we have chosen the theme of diversity for the main summer theme, and which has intensified the whole thinking process, the discovery process into the different subjects of sustainability, being ecology, where we are doing the carbon footprint, where we are thinking now which orchestra is coming how to Lucerne, how can we influence that they take the train from Salzburg to Lucerne or from Paris, or we so far had 1 or 2 orchestras which traveled by train, namely the Berlin Philharmonic, by the way, and who did not choose a charter plane. But of course, you always end up at the point, we have to, we should, but we can't. And when you heard the French president in the European Parliament, I think yesterday it was, or Macron, speaking about now, we're speaking about atomic energy as a new way in the whole thinking of sustainability. Of course, it's safe. Of course, it's not carbons. It's not. It provides a kind of energy that apparently seems to be acceptable. But and now even the green parties in Germany are challenged by this, and you see how they all of a sudden become more flexible to issues. This makes me think a lot, and it makes me think, you know, when we reach the point where we actually have to make a decision, we don't make the decision. We say we should, or maybe we pay money to some kind of organization to clean our souls, but we don't really do anything. And I think that is not acceptable. I think we have to make it more, we have to be more determined, we have to be more imperative about certain developments. We have to tell the orchestras, look, at the end of the day, if you don't come by train in the future, we will not be able to invite you the way we had invited you. Of course, Lucerne is one of the prime orchestral platforms with world recognition. That means we do want to invite the Philadelphia or the Chicago Symphony, the New York Philharmonic, the Cleveland Orchestra, and they come, and obviously we cannot ask them to come by ship. And they have to at least make one flight into Europe by plane, and so does the cargo. Never forget about the cargo, it's not only the orchestras. And the costs are so high now by moving orchestras by train. The tickets are higher than when you charter a plane, and the cargo to be moved by the train is very expensive, much more expensive if it's moved by truck as it's done so far. And again, we reach a point where things seem to be not possible, so let's drop it and maybe we pay some extra compensation costs, but this is not the solution. I think we have to make it more clear, and we have to be among the promoters and presenters more determined to change things and to create new parameters. Otherwise, we will not be successful. And I think it has become clear, and now I'm not in an older generation among the managers. I'm not the 20, 30 years old who actually think, well, if this is going wrong, I might not be alive at some point, or my children will not be alive. I'm actually a grandfather now since 1 month, and I have a granddaughter, and I begin to think, well, what is the subject of ecology going to mean to her? Will she at one day maybe tear apart my picture because she sees me as the generation that did not take correct responsibility? Will I be responsible that at some point in her life, she will not have an existence? Now, this is dramatizing, you may think, and as we know, for us, for the human being, it's easy to fall back into existing patterns. And the minute we close this session here, we go back to our business, and but something will be left. And I think that's what we're doing in the team, and really bringing up these issues. We are bringing up the issues of gender. We're bringing up the issue of female conductors. We have already, and now we are bringing up also very strongly the aspect of colored people on the classical stage, and realizing what has happened in the past centuries, and terrible things, and rediscovering composers from the 19th century, like Florence Price or Joseph Boulogne, Chevalier de Saint-Georges. And then we get some criticism, or you're only doing this for marketing. And that's what you have to live with and go through. But I think we, as one of the major festivals, do have a responsibility, because people look at us, because people in Switzerland look at what the Lucerne Festival does. And so we have to do something. We cannot just sit there. Whether we do everything right and correct and by the most developed standards of how you do it, that is a second question. But if the Lucerne Festival says something has to happen and makes an effort in the best way it can, that will change. So we have to see that responsibility with us in daily life, that we can change. We don't need to have the feeling of frustration, but we also have to know is that it's so easy to say we have to, but we can't. Maybe in 10 years it will be different. One thing that always struck me also is France is a country that has invested in a great deal in a modern infrastructure with trains, already with the TGV, but have other countries, has Switzerland done that? We have a very good train system. We don't need the high-speed trains maybe, but we could have faster connections. We need to think about putting people on the train. Germany's behind, and we need to invest in Europe into these kind of infrastructure that is unified from Spain to Italy to France to Switzerland to also the East countries. We need to be able to move quickly on the trains, and there will have to be solutions for cargos, and we cannot wait with that. And I think our industry needs to push in this direction. So I said a lot, I apologize, but this is about where we stand in Lucerne.
Thank you. It was fascinating. Apropos trains, I'm happy you raised this question, but I'm sure Sophie and Valentina and Aline know much more than me on this. But I know that, for instance, the German and the Swiss trains are so comfortable that you can go there with a double bass or a cello without problem, which is not the case with the TGV. And I know that the French SNCF is trying to find solutions together with our professional syndicates for this. Thanks. We come back maybe on the contents you were speaking with these meetings, which have tripled or quadrupled in time later on. Let's go to Zurich. When I was just thinking how to introduce Michel, I told you he is staying behind one of the most prominent artists. Just and you under your control, Michel. People watching us now, when they are greeting Gian-Andrea Noseda on stage in London, or when they are greeting François-Xavier Roth with this year in Germany, that's Michel and his colleagues behind it. So he is a leading force, and of course, agents, we already invited many of your colleagues on the show, are always at the core of the discussion regarding sustainability, green issues in the industry, because of course artists, and at their own right, and we are happy for this as audiences, wish to show the talents all over the world, and they need to be transported, and as well as their instruments. So Michel, how did these awareness change your personal life first and the life of your company and your artists?
Well, I must say that, let's say my personal life has always been different than my professional life in that aspect. I would say my personal life, I go to work with my bike. I try not to travel as much as possible, and yeah, so personal life is very much a different way of living than what I do professionally. Of course, being in this agency now for almost 20 years has brought me to so many places around the world. I have to admit that my carbon footprint is really bad. There's simply no excuse for that. Numerous trips to Asia, United States, Europe. It's basically, and that's our problem. It's our core of our business, of our activities. It's a people business. We have to meet a lot of people, and we talk to a lot of people. We do a lot of lobbying, of course. We have to try to place and sell our tours, and that involves all those talks. And it was a bit interesting to see now with the pandemic, how will this change? Will our nature of our activities, are they going to change? Because the pandemic was, of course, an external force now, which changed a lot, at least for the time being. And just like it's a small part, but we were happy to suddenly have the opportunity to talk over Zoom. I mean, before, I didn't even know that the company Zoom exists. And when the pandemic broke out 2 weeks afterwards, everybody had a Zoom account. So suddenly it was possible to talk and to use this channel. I know it's a small thing comparing what we travel and what we spend on carbon, but at least this is an important aspect. I still hope that this model of conversation can grow, but let's say we always find different people in our environment. We have, and that has nothing to do with the age, more people who like to deal and to talk in an old-fashioned way, so we have to visit them. And then, of course, we have concerts, we have to be present, we have to be there. But at the same time, we see more and more that we can avoid personal travels by using cameras. And so that's a good thing, even if it's a small step. And I would say, generally speaking, I was always surprised that the topic of sustainability didn't break out before. Actually, I'm surprised, but I'm grateful that, for instance, the IAMA conference, which takes place in Zurich next April, by the way, mentioned the sustainability as one of their main topics. And it's very important because we as a nation, we find ourselves always in the middle of this turmoil. If it's about sustainability, if it's about gender, if it's about countries, and I think we need to talk about, we need to find, as Michel mentioned, we need to find new patterns. We have to sit together and how we can improve the way of our activities. We still believe that touring is important. It's important that orchestras are able to travel, are able to perform in other concert venues. We believe also that the audience, they want that, and we should make that happen. So in my point of view, I think I'm positive that can be done a lot, but at the same time, we have to be realistic on what's possible also from the financial side. Very clear. The impact is huge. I'm happy to talk with a promoter about the residency for an orchestra for 1 week, 6 concerts, 7 concerts. But of course, is this what the promoter wants? That's a different question. And so I think with these questions, we're already in the middle of such a discussion, how we handle tours. So I would say, yeah, let's start there.
We will. As I used to say quite often in such conferences, Michel, that was the easiest part. The second question you will see, I know artist managers are definitely been attacked on the lack of imagination how to organize a week with 120 musicians of the Philadelphia Orchestra. Let's go to London. The math I see for a London-based promoter is the following. I may be totally wrong. Is one of the most difficult equations I've never made. Imagine a city with 12 million inhabitants, highly educated, the city of Charlie Chaplin and Unity Minuin and Sir Simon Rattle. And imagine there are 40 miles sea, and of course there is a tunnel, but the French are co-managing it. So imagine how it looks like. And okay, and there you have a huge desire for performing arts because it's a very joyful people living there, see their PM. And there's COVID, and not only COVID, but of course there's this bad consciousness of now moving around, having airplane. It's not like Paris and Berlin. In London, you can hear the airplane. They are just above your head every 30 seconds. And how can we manage this? I have been asking this question already privately to Hugh and some of his colleagues. And despite this fact, is London still, see the latest conference we had a month ago on London Calling, since the most vibrant classical music scene I personally know in the world, with different layers, the most one of the most important orchestras, one of the most fantastic soloists living there, conductors, but also a great underground scene, and of course, the most one of the leading artists, managers, and promoters. So you personally, you belong to that generation who has been always very concerned by this. You are surrounded by young musicians. One street, I mean, not only a street, or 2 pavements away, you are one of the leading music schools in the world, just before your office. How do you cope with these new concern as a private professional manager?
Well, it's a very interesting equation, Eric, because, you know, as you say, there are 5 major symphony orchestras in London, plus 2 opera orchestras, plus countless period instrument orchestras, smaller ensembles. You know, the diet of London the musical diet is massive. And from the Barbican's point of view, our mission actually, in terms of what we promoted, was to take this local music scene and then add in the best from around the world. And this was something that, you know, a place like the Barbican, we do 7 different shows every night, every week, 7 different performances from 1st of September to late July. Then we sleep for a month in August, and then we're back on it again. And of course, the pandemic then said, stop, rethink. And the really exciting thing actually about the situation was afforded to us. It was, I compared it like to being, like normally we're a hamster on the wheel and we're just spinning round and round and round and round. And the pandemic was the chance to get off and rethink. And we started back in October 2020 with a series of 12 concerts in the autumn, just 12 concerts because it took so long in terms of protocols, in terms of cleaning, in terms of, you know, all these things. And for the first time, we live streamed our own concerts, and we live streamed them to the world with a really high production value. You know, these weren't 1 or 2 cameras. These were, you know, we had 15, 16 cameras in the hall. We took a lot of trouble with it. And it was all UK talent, or UK-based talent. And we made a series of concerts that looked like London. It was 50-50 male, female headline artists. It was 40% musicians of color. It was, you know, this was a chance to actually reset. And the real challenge now, as hopefully we are getting back to times of less restriction, is how do we keep the ideals of what we created in that time with the mass of activity that we had going previously. And it's a real challenge, and we made so many great strides forward, but it is so easy just to retreat to the old position. I said yesterday, it's like putting on a comfortable pair of slippers, but you know they've already got holes in them. You know that you've got to really, this is a time not to just go back to how we were working, but to take those positive messages forward. And the ecological argument about that is huge.
Very, very clear. Time not to go back. For this, we need processes. And all of you have started to explain which kind of processes it has introduced, or you have introduced into your institution. So let's go back to this. There is a white paper being drafted by Sophie and Nathalie Moine, but there are also other think tanks speaking and discussing and publishing on that issue. One is the Shift project in Paris. I just put 5 of their key recommendations and you will probably be able to address them, be it in the green team in Lyon or the kind of meetings, Michel, you were mentioning on task force with your different teams. One issue is reducing the scale. So apropos orchestras, apropos travel panoramas, amount of cities an orchestra is visiting, for instance, is that something which makes sense? Reducing the scale. Second thing is slowing down, remaining 1 week and not 24 hours in diverse cities. So how can we shape it? How can you have Les Siècles staying 1 week in Hamburg, Berlin, and not only for one evening at Music Fest in September? Third thing I read is eco-designing. That probably resonates with Valentina's conscience for Opéra de Paris, but also probably it has something also to do with eco-designing tours, eco-designing project. Does it also address, I don't know, huge issues with eco-designing the way you are receiving the audience? No idea, because one of the issues is also Paris, London, maybe even Zurich-based people are not so much staying at home now from Friday up to Monday. A lot of them have relocated to other places where maybe there is no opera house or concert hall. That may be also a problem in Lyon. So slowing down, reducing the scale, eco-designing. There is a fourth issue, which is relocating. So that has something to do with circuit court. It means do certain musicians, ensembles, orchestra maybe have a need now to relocate. In France, for instance, a lot of independent musicians are not living in major cities. So they were traveling practice. That was default option as an intermittent du spectacle for obvious reasons. Rental costs in major cities in France, including Paris. It's the same in the UK, of course. Does it still make sense to live somewhere and having job and sessions in another place, relocating? And the fifth is a more radical. It's just telling us giving up to certain things, just not doing something we did formally. So this is just, we say in France, is a list à la Prévert, a famous poet, but probably it resonates. So maybe, I don't know, who wants to start explaining yours? So Valentina, you please do what it proposed or what it has already activated as processes.
So thank you very much. I know very well the travel, the work of Shift Project, which is a think tank which work for an evolution of economy in France, and they have a focus over the culture. I know all the issues you say, but I just want to give you one more information. Because I've been, when I started to study this sustainability, I discover many information from where I was very far away. And it's a question about dimension and scale about our impact. So first information I want to give you is a document which has been published some weeks ago, is Oxfam, who says then 10% of the most richest people in the world are responsible, or more than 15% of global warming, and 15% of the carbon footprint. But who are the 10% of people of the most rich in the world? The 10% is people which has a revenue, I guess, than 35,000 for a year. It's not so much. So you have to slow down to 1% of the richest people in the world. And who are the 1% of the richest people of the world? Is people who has a revenue, I guess, than $75,000 for a year. So here we found the entire population, mostly population of Europe and North America. And what is more interesting for me is that is our public, is our target. So when we go to have a visit in a waste of fabric, you can be really shocked about the dimension of what we threw out. I'm really shocked. I've been really shocked about it. But what I was more shocked is to discover that waste represents 0% of the global footprint of our activities. So, wow. So where is our impact? Of course, we often, so first think for every one of us is to calculate our impact, but not only the direct impact, energy you waste, you use, but always everything is around in a very systemic approach, an holistic approach. And of course, many times we speak about mobilities, as you say. So do we have to stop to have a tournée? And this would be catastrophic for culture. We don't have to figure out that artist has to stop to fly and to move, to move. Because I think this is one of the most important thing for our culture, to mix culture. So we have to preserve that artist has to move. But if an effect, we have to reduce and manage how the public move. This is not the same thing. But what will be the big challenge for our for us now is to help people to change their habit. We live in a world that overproduce everything. We are overusing all the natural global resource of the earth. So we need to change our point of view. And most you are rich, as I guess you are rich, is I guess in an exponential point of view, curve, your impact will be strong over the country. So we need, and this is our responsible of the culture work for me, and this is the first issue, and this there we have to work as much as we can as to introduce and to make a changing of point of view of our public, which is the target, which has the most highest influence in the global warming, you know. So it's a really question of scale. And when we understand that, for example, the Shift project, they listen 4 kind of transformation. This is really interesting. The first one they called a transparent transformation, which means that you don't need money, and this kind of transformation won't change anything in the quality of your own principal activity. For example, what you will eat, if you eat just vegetable, won't change the quality of your show, but it will reduce in a very high level the impact on the world, on the indirect quantity of the water, because and the global footprint. So we have to track all the transparent transformation and act them now. So it's just first point of view, because
no, I mean, changing the audience mindset, having the audience moving and having a more holistic point of view. Who wants to react to this? And maybe wants to be a little bit more specific also on all the issues which have been already raised.
Maybe Eric, on the audience, Aline. I can go on, because when I had this first awareness on how do we do in the future with our tours, how do we do, because we need tours. My first idea was to go to the tour managers, and it was in early 19. And I was not completely convinced by the answer that I had at that time. I thought I was really naive. I thought that they would be the first to have set something and a strategy to rationalize or to make tours possible with a reduced carbon footprint. And I realized it was not the case, because they were, but Michel will probably tell us about that, they were in between everyone. They were in between the promoters, in between the orchestras. And I mean, their living was made of satisfying both orchestras and promoters, and difficult for them to put a constraint on both promoters and orchestras. So what I did is I didn't know how to tackle this issue. And I had the opportunity in end 2022 to have to be helped to do the carbon footprint of the structure, which is both a whole and an orchestra. It's a 104 musician orchestra, symphonic orchestra, plus a 2,000 seat hall. And it was a startup company, We Count, who had decided to create a way of calculation that was easier than the one we were used to have, and that was not easy to use for people like us. And they decided to have a 3 months program to help various structures to create their carbon footprint. And I go quick on the process, but the result, I really wanted to know where came the main impacts, because if we were losing energy, time, money, human resources on something that has 0% impact, but seems very symbolic to us, maybe that's not the right way to address the subject. So that's why I wanted to have facts. And I was really surprised by the result, honestly. Nearly 50% of the carbon footprint is the audience coming to the hall. That was really my surprise, because I was focused on the tours, and we decided to make the carbon footprint on the 19th year, the year of the 3-week tour in China, on purpose for that. And then just after 30% of the carbon footprint was the tour artists, tours and artists moving. But of course, when we have a soloist coming from New York, it's much less impact than when the whole orchestra plus technicians plus the cargo goes on tour to China, of course. And then the surprise was that the minority of the impact was the building itself, and also the numeric devices. That was not so strong in an impact. So, and the problem was with that result, that the two main things to address were the two most difficult to address. How do you work for your audience? You are not the audience. What do you do for them? And then the tours, we definitely need tours. So how do you address this subject? So I don't have the answers yet, because we are starting the process with what has become a project group with what was the green team, and which is now a structurized a team and project group linked to the direction. And but we have started to address these two subjects, and I hope I think the challenge we have in front of us, and that's good that we are all together around this virtual table. I think the main challenge is to manage to find common rules, because we are all linked together. I mean, halls, orchestras, train industry is all linked together. So at some point, we will have to work together to find the right way to hire orchestras or to go on tour. And I'm really looking forward to working in the same direction as others.
Aline, may I ask you if you also had access to such facts? Did you also notice that 50% of the carbon footprint of the Barbican Center comes from the audience coming to your place?
We haven't done such a study, and in a city like London, I wonder, just how much people are actually coming in on public transport as opposed to in cars. I don't know the situation of the concert hall in Lyon. But just one thing I would say in that subject, particularly around orchestras and around orchestral tours, and it's very easy for me to make this kind of statement with a hall that is the home of the London Symphony Orchestra and also the BBC Symphony Orchestra and others. But it feels to me like the shift that is going to happen is that the artistic imperative of touring is actually going to become front and center, far more important than previously. And the idea, like if orchestras are serious about wanting to be in locations for multiple concerts, then their programs must become more about what is extraordinary that they do in their home seasons that they want to tour, rather than taking touring programs that are actually bland, sorry to use that word, but universal enough to be accepted by every promoter on a series of one-stop shops around Europe. And that feels like actually what would be a really positive move, is that we will get back to the real individuality of ensembles, what makes their artistic raison d'etre so important that these projects then have to tour, not about we want to tour, how do we make that happen?
Back to authenticity. Yeah, just to contextualize the Lyon situation under Aline's control, of course, it is extraordinarily well connected. It's 500 meters from one of the biggest railway stations in France with TGV and TER regional trains and subways and tramways. So there are a lot of opportunities to come with public transportation to Auditorium in Lyon, like the Barbican, which is also exceptionally.
I'd say, Eric, that everyone gets lost trying to drive to the Barbican, so they don't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Even musicians, I heard during the negotiation. Maybe Michel, as a leading agent. So how can you make these mass functioning with, so staying, let's say, a couple of days, maybe not a week, but so multiple programs, keeping in touch with the authenticity of the project itself, having maybe less artists program, maybe only one soloist or two, and not 5 or 6 for different concerts, maybe getting rid of the territorial exclusivity clauses, which are preventing a lot of artists to, optimize their touring plans, having maybe less instrument being transported, so asking the dear percussionists of your favorite orchestras to use the colleagues' percussions or the double bass players. I mean, a lot of people are already doing that, but I know in certain cases it's so. How do you cope with that, and you and your colleagues?
Well, lots of questions.
I told you it would be hard now.
Yeah. Well, as everybody else, I don't have the solution right now on my plate, but that has to be discussed. I mean, the point you made is very, very good. So it's about individuality of the orchestras, and generally I can say that what I saw in the last 20 years is that so many orchestras want to go on tour that it's basically there were orchestras offering me tour. I thought, do you really need to go on tour? So I think every orchestra first has to question themselves, do I really need to go on tour? Do I want to go on tour? Does it make sense to go on tour? Because it's not for everybody. It might sound now a bit, let's say, exclusive in a certain point of view, but not everybody has to go on tour or should go on tour. I believe that there are many orchestras who do a wonderful job in their hometown, and it's very important that they play there, educating the audience, bringing programs, but maybe they shouldn't go on tour. Maybe tours should be only for a certain amount of orchestras. I don't know. That's one question. The second question is, of course, then of course, exclusivity is one of the trade-offs here. I understand that, for instance, in certain festivals need exclusivity because otherwise they will not be able to fill the hall. But then why it's not possible to fill the hall? I think this leads to the question where we have to work on the education and make our environment. And I'm sorry to say that the classic music world in certain places is still, it's a niche. It's not everybody goes to concerts anymore. It's not that we are in the year of in the 50s, not that I have been living then, but it's not so popular anymore to go to classical concerts, not everywhere. So the question is really, should we have to invest also on the education? We have to teach to the young people that classic music is important, because that would lead that we have more audience for local orchestras, and I think that would help a lot if we are not if we don't have an audience of a certain group or a certain part of the society where it's limited. I mean, that would change a lot in our environment. And of course, I understand that you mentioned, Aline, you mentioned that 50% of the carbon is out of the public. And of course, if we create more public, that doesn't help either. But I mean, we are not in the world, in a world where we can just sit and watch what's happening around. And of course, then, yeah, the discussion about programs and the exclusivity, that's a wider discussion we should have. We love to add concerts which are within a certain geographical range. We even now, when we plan tour and we talk to promoters about tours, we try to explain them, listen, this is an orchestra you were asking us to bring. So please now, these are the 14 days we have. Why don't you take it? It makes sense. We have a concert before in a city which is 200 kilometers far away. It really makes sense. They can take the train, they travel to your venue, that's it. But it's not that easy. The diversity of the promoters regarding the planning is very complex, and sometimes venues, they have their own concerts, they have their own orchestras, they rent out the hall. Putting together a 10-day tour is very, very challenging. I must say that's a fact. So if we have to make tours sustainable, of course, we need more concerts on one place within a tour, but at some point it probably needs financial resources, because it means traveling by train is way more expensive than sometimes flights. Cargo is an issue, and I'm sorry to say, if I would ask somebody from the LSO London if they would accept to play on double basses from a local orchestra, they wouldn't take me seriously. I mean, you also don't ask, I don't know, a tennis player to play on just a random racket. It's not, yeah.
Actually,
It's maybe a bit simplified, but that's where we are.
I see. So we better understand, Aline was saying a couple of years ago, colleagues were not prepared perfectly because they were sitting a bit behind. or between too many challenges, but we better understand now technically the high amount of work which is still to be done. But this, Michel, would you also say, like Michel was saying, going on tour is not for everybody, but going to Lucerne Festival is also not for everybody, and never was, but probably is still more true now in 22, despite you pushing for more diversity, card people, feminine conductors, etc. So what are the most innovative choices you had to take, or you already taking with your team for the 22 edition, helping with coping with these environmental challenges?
Well, actually, we see what we see is a lot of activities from the artists, from the orchestras. I mean, big, very renowned conductors. They try not to fly forth and back anymore. If somebody has a position in the United States, he tries to spend there at least a couple of months where he could fulfill his tenure there, but even take other engagements. And that makes sense, and we can focus on that. That's very important. And then you have orchestras. They're clearly giving us the task, listen, we can tour them, but we have to minimize the flight by one flight by arriving or flying back, but the rest of it has to be with we want to ride on trains. German orchestras actually have that already in their internal agreements for a long time. I think orchestras like Bayerischer Rundfunk, they probably don't fly a lot. I don't think so. Whenever they can, they take the train. And of course, that means that we depend on innovation, and innovation will help us a lot. Speaking of cargo, hopefully that will improve as well. I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. I mean, I'm positive. But it's not that we have like big innovations now within our company at the moment that we say, well, this is, we walk to the concert hall because it's, I don't know, it's only half an hour or so.
So I'm sure in Lucerne there is institutional innovation, as it has always been. We remember the ensemble, contemporary music, the orchestra, Lucerne Orchestra, etc. So, Michel, what are the major innovative steps in these coming months?
Well, I think in terms of ecology, we definitely have it now on our radar screen to see who is coming how. So it means, step by step. I mean, if we always have this far goal ahead, we get very emotional and we lose a lot of time. We have to see how can we get further, what are the steps to be taken. So we look how many orchestras are coming, where are they coming from, are they traveling by train, how can we influence maybe a little bit their decision process. Asking questions is the first step. How are you coming? If we don't come by train, we have an anti-reaction, maybe, by certain groups that just are not as far developed yet, or mentally or organizationally, but to get into that. I mean, we have a strong interest as an orchestral festival to get moving on this and to take action and to influence our partners in a positive way, to take the train. And it's possible to do that. You can have a European tour from Paris to Berlin, from Paris to Brussels, to Amsterdam, to Berlin, to Munich. There is a speed train between Berlin and Munich that goes 3 hours and a half. Very good train, by the way. Create awareness from Salzburg to Lucerne. It's a beautiful train ride, 5 hours. And you only have to change once. Or you say, we pick you up there and there by the buses. But we have to get moving and we have to create the parameters. I think that we can change a lot with the audience. We have a fortunate situation that we have the train station right next to the concert hall. So wherever you come from in Switzerland, it's not wise to take the car because you get stuck in the traffic jam. You have much more comfort in the train. From Zurich, it's 50 minutes. From Basel, it's 1 hour. From Bern, it's 1 hour. From Geneva, it's 3 hours. From Lausanne, it's 2 hours. They're direct trains where you don't have to change, promote. But we also have, for instance, if you take the train, you get, I think, around 30% discount on your train ticket. So you go with the ticket from the Lucerne Festival to the train station, you show your ticket, and you get a discount of about, it used to be 50, but we changed it to 30%. So these are very good factors. I think for us, the challenge now is to reduce the traveling inside, foremost for me. I'm the person who travels the most in the company. And so I have to change. COVID helped in this way because we couldn't travel. So we changed. We have now the virtual conferences. We don't just fly to Vienna to meet somebody. We see whether we have to, but you become aware that each flight you take is a challenge to our climate. And that definitely is changing, I think. So I think you can also achieve something by doing little things rather than ending up in an emotional cloud that at the end will not produce any progress.
I must admit, I'm deeply convinced and enthusiastic about what you said. I'm a bit disappointed. I hoped you were announcing us some very new instrumental ensemble you had decided to put together, I don't know, in a digital form or something with a Lucerne Festival label, which allows people maybe to travel less and still working together. Or are you not on a 5-10 years deadline horizon working on such very innovative issues as you have always done in Lucerne, building new halls, putting together new ensembles? Is there not something in the air, or is it science fiction?
Well, last summer, we created the Lucerne Festival Contemporary Orchestra. In Lucerne, we created the new contemporary festival in Lucerne. I think after the 2 years now, and now almost 3 years of COVID, we have a strong interest to get back on stage physically. We developed a digital platform with digital formats. We developed a streaming platform and all of this. And obviously this plays a big role also in the future. It will be, in a hybrid manner. But right now we have to, I have to tell you, our objective now is to get people back into the concert halls. My colleagues in Zurich and in Lucerne right now, the season promoters are working with, under great challenges in terms of ticket sales. The ticket sales are down, subscriptions are down tremendously, and we have to get people back into the concert hall. We have to, enable our artists we invite to be performing again with full houses. That's what they live for. And as long as we have human beings performing on stage, the virtual channel is, of course, highly attractive, an additional platform, but I don't think it can substitute the real life experience of performance, of human interaction. And that I don't see. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but okay.
I get it.
Our meet, yeah. We also need the meeting among each other. I see that with the team. We have so many virtual meetings in the team every day, and when we meet then again in the office, it's a completely different situation.
I get it. Wonderful. That's probably why Sophie's white paper was called Le Spectacle, Show Business et le Vivant, and the living. We have to come to conclusive words, and there is no one more suited for that than Sophie. As you know, we are here under the umbrella of the Centre National de la Musique. This is last year it was more than 200 million euros budget. Institutions that house, the French love to spend public money, and that's really fair enough for that. But you are all living in countries, including you in the UK, where there is still some public money and some regulations and some strong will to enforce and support diversity and environmental issues. So, Sophie, if you had I don't know, 3 to 5 recommendations to forward to policymakers all around Europe on this issue, which ones would you choose among the vast array of things we have been expressing here in this roundtable?
Well, Eric, it's pretty ambitious, but thanks for your confidence. Here, you know, I think it's precious, all what you just shared about what we could do on a very concrete way to have an impact about mobility. But I think the point here is that we have to kind of, you, Humphreys, said it in a way, we have to reassess our values and our shared values. That's the point. Either we speak on a local, regional, or international scale. It's not about opposing international development and short circuits, or it's rather about conciliate our expectations for environmental and social responsibility, for sobriety and cultural diversity. So maybe the first thing is to, well, cooperate. IAMA has been mentioned, and there are here some general managers of institutions, concert halls, Aline with the Auditorium in Lyon, and you with the Barbican. But there are also the public sector, the public actors defining, at least in France, public cultural policies. So it is very important that we have more and more opportunities to express our views and to define shared objectives. That's the first thing. And maybe the very first thing to do is to reconsider the way we build relationships with the audience. You know, it was almost shocking. Valentina said before that she was shocked sometimes. When I used to be an artist manager, I have built really great and exciting relationships with professionals, but sometimes it had more to do, with commercial transactions than building projects with ambition, speaking of our relationships with the audience. So what about considering giving a more important, more room to the way we conceive the artistic offer, the programs, with the audience, feeling that, well, they might be entitled to share also their views about what are the subjects, the topics that are important for them. It's not, you know, bringing revolution and, you know, not considering these whole things of performing arts from the demand point of view rather than the offer. We are professionals, we have expertise to share, and I don't want to withdraw all of this, but it would be important to give them more room, I think. And you know, I was thinking of this mission I have at the very moment for the Montpellier Opera. And we have been discussing a lot with the teams of the Opera and the Orchestre de Montpellier about the way we are addressing the audience, because why the situation is so demanding, it is because we have to raise awareness within our teams. So it is like a business to business issue here, but at the same time, we have to deal with it with the audience. So it becomes a business to consumers, if I want to speak of it in economic terms. It is a business to consumers issue. So how we could consider to call them not audiences, but what they are, inhabitants, and to take into consideration the context of our concert halls and theaters and so on and so on. They are mostly, first of all, inhabitants, and they have to be, engaged. They have to commit in our cultural issues, as well as professionals are committed in it. So there is a need for reassessment of our values first, and a need for cooperation, a very urgent need for cooperation.
Great. Does any one of you add a postscriptum, which would be the last conclusion? When you see Françoise appearing, it means that we are already over time. If not, so let's enter into what I would dare to call the new Spider-Man badge for our industry: artists, managers, promoters, institutions, and audiences alike. With great powers come great responsibility. So now it's time. Thank you so much to all of you for having chaired the discussion. Thanks to all of numbers and several viewers, and thanks for and foremost to Françoise and Victor and their team at Centre National de la Musique for hosting us. See you soon.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you enormously to all of you, and thank you, Eric. I think we have been hearing some very concrete proposals and actions, and that's very inspiring, actually. So once again, thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.